Hi everyone, this is 5 things I learned from being unemployed for a while. And I thought it'd be helpful just to give some context because everyone's situation's different and I think it can be useful. My unemployment period was intentional. I was coming to the end of a work contract, and instead of kind of applying for jobs before that end date, I knew that I wanted to take a little bit of time just to travel, take a break, and work on other things for a while and focus on other things. So I know sometimes unemployment periods for people can be very different because sometimes it's a chosen break, other times it's not, and it's a consequence of very horrible situations and things that have led to that. So I just wanted to give some context, but there are some things that I have learned during this period that I thought would be helpful for anyone listening out there who is currently unemployed or is taking a break, but maybe is sort of questioning that a little, doubting themselves, because I think we live in a society that is very conditioned to working all the time and yeah, basing things on work, which is important and needed. You need to work to survive, especially if you're part of society. The first thing I learned was time is currency. So I wasn't going to be getting a regular salary anymore, a regular paycheck. And so for me, my currency during this period was time. And time is so valuable. And that really was highlighted to me during this period, that essentially time is something you can never get back. So it's incredibly valuable at any age of your life. And you can choosing what you want to do with your time can be invaluable because it can give you a sense of control over your life. You can prioritize the things that you want to. And essentially, that's how I viewed my time. And time for me was precious. And I remember, especially in the early days of my break, I was just, when I'd go out to do errands or if I'd go for a walk, I would sort of remind myself, oh, you actually have time. So slow down, you can take your time. If someone on the street, and I remember a moment where there was someone who was asking for donations for a charity. And usually most people, I think, walk past and we are sort of on a time limit. But this time I was like, yeah, let's hear what their charity's doing. Let's take some time out to speak to them. And that's because I had time. And yeah, you realize that time is invaluable. And sometimes, in most cases, it's more valuable than money because time is not something you can get back. And when you have time, you can, not only do I find that I enjoy things more, but you get to prioritize what you want to do. And so those 8 hours every day, and especially if you commute to work, you add on those maybe 10 hours per day, that's kind of bang in the middle of a day. Instead of that being taken up by a structured period of work, I could choose how I wanted to structure my day. And just remember, if you aren't getting an income right now, time is your currency, and see the value in that because it's invaluable. The second thing is that freedom can bring much joy. Now, I mean this in the sense, obviously it's related to now. I have all of my days free. I don't have to be somewhere with a rigid structure to my day. And so for me, that was freedom in the day. That was freedom because I had the time. And there are many different aspects of freedom. You can have financial freedom. You can have freedom in life to do the things that you want to and go to places that you want to without it being an issue. There are so many aspects to it. But having the freedom to choose what you want to do with your day was incredible. And I realized I am so privileged, but I wanted to travel, and I could essentially, because I left my booking quite late, I could essentially travel anywhere in the world that I wanted to, obviously considering my savings and the money that was needed for the travel and safety and travel regulations, of course. But just even the idea that I could literally be anywhere in the world because of this time and, not having to be anywhere was freeing. And I was like, this is freedom. And when you have that sense of freedom, it can provide a lot of joy because it allows for flexibility. And when you feel, again, I think it relates to that sense of control. I can be flexible in how I want to shape my day and how I want to shape this week, this month, whatever the time period is. And again, that's another invaluable thing, freedom and the sense of freedom we as humans have. And actually, it hit me that a lot of the time in life, we think, and I'm not saying we don't have free will, we do, and we have the choice to make decisions. A lot of the time, it's our choice, but we live in a society that requires us to work. You need a roof over your head. We don't have control of the prices of things. We don't have control of certain things that happen to us and where we were born and our upbringing. That's not within our control. And with that kind of highlighted to me, it was nice to kind of realize that right now I have freedom and I have a sense of freedom. And so that is another invaluable thing. And that can bring a lot of positive emotions. The third lesson, or the third thing that I learned, was that your identity and your job are separate. I think it's a very normal thing, especially in the Western world, that people sort of, those interactions you have maybe with your neighbors or people that you know but maybe don't know you too well. The typical questions they ask you is, oh, hi, how are you? How's work? It kind of goes to work. And of course, I'm not blaming anyone for asking that. I ask people how's work, but everything is centered, or a lot of things are centered around work. A lot of the time, especially if you started work from a young age and you've done that into your 60s, maybe even 70s, that is a huge amount uh, of your life dedicated to something. And we almost associate ourselves with this career, with this job, when in reality, we are not our job. You might be a psychologist or a teacher or a retail assistant, but that's not who you are. That's what you do. You may be a gardener as a profession, but who you are, your identity encompasses so many things that is not related to what you do. And I think this is where it can actually be a difficulty, especially during retirement, or if for example, an athlete has an injury and then they have to figure out what they're doing next, we can see how devastating it is when someone loses a career suddenly. It's like they have lost their identity. They don't know who they are anymore. And it makes sense because when you dedicate a lot of time, and especially athletes, they literally dedicate most of the hours of their life when they are actually sort of training for something towards that thing. And suddenly, when they're not doing it, it would totally make sense to be like, what am I supposed to do now? I have all these hours in the day and I don't know what to do. But it's helpful to remember that your job is not your identity. And I think this is what we really need to cultivate when we are in a career, but beyond that and outside of that. Who are we? What makes us tick? What do we enjoy doing? Not because someone expects this of us or because we have to do it for work, but purely because we want to do it or we find something fulfilling in it. And for me, this period of time was a great way to kind of consolidate like what I enjoy doing. And it's always that it's a cliche thing, but we are not human doings, we're human beings. And for me, part of why I think we're on this earth is literally to be and to experience the world. It can be as simple as that. That was something really helpful for me to remember. And the fourth thing that I learnt was that creating is important, especially as a human. We are creating even when we don't realize it. We create outfits, we maybe think of what we want to have for dinner and we come up with a meal. We create our days if they're not structured by something else. Humans are meant to be creative. It's a way of expressing ourselves. And I made a video on why creating is important a few weeks ago. So check that out if you're interested. But this period of time allowed me to do more creating than usual, creating these videos, creating a YouTube channel which was not something that I intended to do, but I did it. Creating more art, painting for me was something that I did more of during this time. There's many benefits of creating, but when you create something, it's a way of producing something in the world that's unique to you. How something turns out, whether it's a song, whether it's a recipe, whether it's a piece of art, no one is going to create that same piece of art the way that you did. And so you can kind of see it as a fingerprint. It's unique to you. And not only are there benefits to it, but sometimes, because it's a way to express ourselves, there may be no other way to express a certain emotion but through creation. And I know a lot of songwriters, musicians, and artists, that is why they create, because it's a catharsis, it's a release, they just feel like they have to do it. And I do understand. And some people refer to it as being like a healing process or a spiritual process. But there is something about creating something that is so powerful to humans. And I think giving yourself permission to be creative and also to create regularly, even if you don't think of yourself as being a creative person, is a very special and important thing, because whether you know it or not, you are a creative being because you're creating something if you're living. Whether that's a meal, whether that's planning a trip, you're still creating that trip, that day, what that looks like. yeah, it reminded me that creating is important. And I guess when I'm working, I don't have as much time to think about it. And so when I did have this time, I could really dedicate some time to it. And the final thing that I learned is that perspective is everything. How you see a situation can determine a lot of things and directly affect how you feel about something. And sometimes seeing it in a different way is a choice. You can choose to look at it in a certain way that would be more helpful. An example of how perspective is everything I can give is from I watched an interview with Justin Vernon, who is part of Bon Iver, a band. They've released a new album recently, Sable Fable. It's amazing. It's a great album, personally, for me. And he was saying how he came to London recently in this interview, and he was talking about taking the tube, the underground, and there's a particular line on there called the Northern Line. And he was saying how it made this kind of epic screeching sound. And he was kind of getting his equipment to record it because he's always looking for new sounds to include or experiment with. And I thought, wow, that's so cool, because that same sound, I take the Northern Line quite frequently, and I hear that sound regularly, which, changes things a little bit. But when I hear that sound, I think, oh my goodness, it's deafening. Can they not do something about it? And I do see people wince because it's very loud. But him describing the sound as part of kind of music and a sound to experiment with, and the way he described it, he was like, this is a interesting sound, and I never really thought about it like that. And it's funny because after hearing that, when I went back on the Northern Line and I heard it, it made me smile, because I was like, oh yeah, there's me and others like wincing at it, and then there's someone who is using and thinking about this sound creatively. And that's an example of how perspective is everything, and how a similar situation can be different for everyone because of how they look at it and their perspective on it. And you can choose to look at a certain way in a certain way. For me, taking a break was intentional, but the job hunting aspect of finding employment again was so frustrating. So frustrating. That's when I would get down about being unemployed. But I always felt grateful for the time that I had. And as soon as I started changing and shifting my perspective, I enjoyed the period more. So yes, right now, if you are unemployed, it can be difficult, and you may have to think financially, how am I going to stretch this money? Hopefully you have savings. Of course, if you don't, I'm so sorry. And I think that's where it becomes different, because it's about survival. But if you do have savings, and you are able to live relatively comfortably, and still keep searching for a job, look at this period as a time to invest in yourself. And I think a good question to be reminded of daily when you are sort of feeling bad about unemployment, because that society, sort of the effects of society can do that for us, is how am I going to use this time in a positive way for me? Because essentially, going back to the first thing that I shared about time being currency. So, yeah, how are you going to use your time for you? So, just remember, perspective is everything. And for anyone in the position who is unemployed and looking for a job, my heart goes out to you, and I'm wishing you all the very best with that, because it's so tricky, and especially in today's world. But do remember that shifting your perspective can be a really helpful thing, especially if you're having a bad day or you're going through like a negative thought cycle. Just thinking about your situation in a slightly different way can mean that you make this period more meaningful for you, which can do wonders. So don't forget that. And for anyone listening out there, whether it's day or evening, have a great rest of your day/evening.